lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, we incarnate together, but we change our roles and we change our gender. The essence of the soul remains the same. The body changes, the role we play changes, but there's just something about a person that you can usually identify as, I know them. I know them on some other deeper level.
Joanne DiMaggio, welcome to Passion Harvest. Really looking forward to our conversation today.
I am too, Luisa. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I've done a bit of research on you, and gosh, you've got a wealth of information. I'd love to briefly start, just for the audience, if they don't know about you, your journey and your intricate spiritual connection with the Beatles.
Okay. Well, uh, briefly, I was president of a Beatles fan club when I was a teenager, so that gives you an idea how old I am. um, and I had that club for 8 years. And then after they broke up, about 15 years after they broke up, um, I saw Shirley MacLaine's miniseries on Out on a Limb on her book. And she was talking about reincarnation. And I had been reading about reincarnation prior to the Beatles coming into my life. So when I was adolescent, I had grown up, I was raised Catholic. I had a lot of questions about Catholicism that weren't getting answered. And so in my summers, I was picking up books about Edgar Cayce and books that were written by the leading writers at that time, which was Ruth Montgomery and Jess Stern and people like that. And they were talking about reincarnation. And I read a book about Bridie Murphy, The Search for Bridie Murphy. That was the first book about reincarnation that I read as a kid. And then, of course, the Beatles came around in 64. And then after that, I didn't really think about reincarnation until, like I said, 15 years later, after they broke up. And then Shirley MacLaine comes out with Out on a Limb. And I saw that, and it just reawakened my interest in that topic. And all through the years, I kept wondering, why was I so passionate about the topic of reincarnation when, I was raised in a blue collar neighborhood, the south side of Chicago. Nobody talked about reincarnation. And I often wondered, well, where were those seeds planted? And so then the thought came in my head, maybe it was the Beatles. Maybe it was those 8 years I was involved with the Beatle fan club. And thinking about that, that was sort of germinating for quite a while. And finally, I thought, you know what? I think that's exactly what happened. And that's what led me to write my new book, The Inner Light.
A big congratulations. The Inner Light, how the Beatles planted the spiritual seeds in our souls. I'd love to discuss a bit more about that later in the interview, but you are
Okay.
a past life therapist and reincarnation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced past lives yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anyone should really go into this as a profession unless you have thoroughly um, done your own work. So looked into your own past lives. I've worked with many other past life therapists prior to my becoming one. I did a lot of research. I started a past life research and education organization when I lived in Chicago, and had a lot of the leading edge speakers coming in. I was involved with ARE, which was Edgar Cayce's Association for Research and Enlightenment. And they had a lot of speakers coming in. So, so between a lot of those people that were past life therapists who came in to do talks, I usually would book a session with them. But I also had a small circle of like-minded souls, and I was doing an awful lot of work on my own past life journey so that I would understand it from all aspects of it before I would, the privilege of working with somebody. I really want them to know that this is new for me. This is something I have been working on for a very long time.
For those of the audience that haven't experienced the sensations, the awareness, the consciousness of a past life, Are you able to describe perhaps some of your most profound experiences of your past life and how they've assisted you in this life?
Well, from my own experience, and yet from the thousands of people I've actually worked with over the years from all over the world, most people come into it with the same question: why am I here? What is this life all about? I don't understand why this is happening to me. I don't understand why I have these problems, these patterns keep repeating themselves. So for me, the most rewarding aspect of this work is when somebody has an aha moment. In other words, we're talking about what's the source, what's the uh, underlying cause of what's going on in your life now. And they may have examined it from all aspects in their current life. They may have been going into psychotherapy, they may have been working with other practitioners, and they're not getting any answers. So when I do a regression with somebody, I ask their soul to take them to the lifetime that's most impacting them right now, because we've had many, 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 many past lives, but you're not working on issues from all of them. There was one in particular that happened, and it could have happened 1,000 years ago. We just don't know. That there's some unfinished business, something that you may have done to somebody, or they may have done something to you. It set up this unfinished karma, and you decided when you were planning the life that you have now, in your pre-life planning session, you thought, you know what, this life I'm coming into, this is the perfect one to work on the issues from that particular past life. And so we bring them in with us. And having a regression will help you to see that. You'll go to the source. You'll understand, where did this all start? What role did I have to play in all of this? Who are these people that are in my life now? And what role are they playing? Were they in my life before? And, what do I do with this information now that I have it? How do I apply it so that I could move on and be free of these issues that have been plaguing me for my whole life?
So when we transition from our physical body, what we identify as Joanne and Luisa, we in some way are imprinted and we carry traumas and hurts and cyclic wounds through our many lives.
Right.
Gosh, life's tough. and, and and what I'm also hearing is that the people that we meet in lifetimes, we meet them sometimes over and over again to heal karmic relationships and patterns.
Oh, absolutely. We travel with the same group of souls. We're I like to think of us as a pod, a soul pod, a family of souls. We've been together since the very beginning of time. So lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, we incarnate together, but we change our roles and we change our gender. So your mother in this life could have been your brother in a previous life. Your best friend in this life could have been your father in a previous life. So that's one of the benefits of a regression, is that you're able to identify, because the essence of the soul remains the same. And how Shakespeare said the eyes are the windows to the soul. They are. The eyes remain the same. The body changes, the role we play changes, but there's just something about a person that you can usually identify as, I know them. I know them on some other deeper level.
Mm.
And that happens all the time when you meet somebody you've never met before and they feel familiar to you somehow. Like, I think I sense that I know them on some level. So we travel together, lifetime after lifetime, with the sole purpose of helping each other out. So if you establish, this is my mission in this life, you know, say you want to work on the issue of abandonment because you may have abandoned somebody in a prior life, and now to balance that out, you're going to experience that. So these souls will come in with you and they'll go, you know what? I'm going to help you out with that. At some point in life, I'm going to abandon you. So that you're going to know how that feels. Now, that's a simplification, obviously, of how this works, but that's the role that we play with each other. We come in as a support system. Sometimes we encourage each other. Sometimes we create challenges for each other. but nonetheless, it's all with the same identical purpose, and that's to enable our souls to work through the issues that we decided to work through so we could be free of them and move on.
Yes, the lessons aren't always pleasant. And once we've
No,
once we've overcome what we've chosen to in our pre-birth plan, we don't need to repeat those lessons again. Is that correct?
that's right. That's right. Once you've completed that, think of it as school, going to school. Think of Earth as a school, and you're a little soul coming in from spirit, got your little backpack on. But you've worked with the Council of Elders, which I equate to like school guidance counselors. You've looked at everything you need to work on, and you've drawn up a curriculum so that when you come to Earth and you enter this school called Earth, that you have certain lessons that you're going to be working on in this lifetime. Once those lessons are complete, you don't repeat them, just like you wouldn't repeat it if you were in school. So the idea is complete the lesson, hopefully get a passing grade, and then you can move on to the next level. That's how that works.
Is there an endpoint to this reincarnation cycle?
Oh yeah, at some point you don't need to come back anymore. Um, I haven't met too many people who are in that enviable position. A lot of people think they don't have to come back again.
Well, I have many
And
people say to me, I would never choose this earth plane to come back. Do we have free will to choose, make that choice?
sure, you can. You don't have to come back to the earth. There's other places you could go to, but like Edgar Casey said, anything that started on the earth has to be completed on the earth. This is the best school that souls have. I mean, we made this decision at the beginning of time that we would come here and experience what it's like to be a spiritual being inhabiting a physical body. There are things that you can only learn in the physical on the earth. These aren't things that you can replicate in spirit world. So, all of us are taking whatever course we need to take, graduating and moving on, and eventually you won't do it anymore. You won't have to do it anymore. And or some people, some souls don't have to come back to earth, but they come back anyway to be in service to other souls here. So especially people that come in with physical challenges or emotional or mental challenges. Some of those people, we think to ourselves, well, I wonder what they did to earn that kind of karma. Well, it could be that they're very advanced souls and that they're coming in uh, uh, to enable you to enact with them. And the lesson really is about you, not about them. So that's why it's good not to judge anybody at any point in time, because you just really don't know what their soul's agenda is for that lifetime.
Mm. And we always like to look outside of us for the answers or the cause of our suffering or the problems, but I guess it really is all within us.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I've heard over and over again in my practice is people like to blame. Oh, it's my mother's fault or my father's fault, it's my husband's fault, it's my teacher's fault or whatever. When in actuality, um, we only have to look at ourselves because we designed this life to be the way it is, to present the challenges to us that we needed to resolve some unfinished karma so that we can move on. So it's all, there's nothing random. I don't believe in life. So it to me, um, one of my books is called "I Did It to Myself Again,"
Mm.
meaning that I planned this out so that these things would have the most likelihood to come up, so that I could deal with them. Yeah.
So I'm just backtracking. So the soul is in another dimension. The soul, we are an aspect of our soul. Is that correct?
Yes, I would say that's correct. Mhm.
And is it, I mean, there's so many different theories and thoughts on this. Is it your belief that we have an oversoul or a soul and we're having multiple incarnations at the same time?
You know what? I've heard that. I've read that. I never say no. Nothing is not a possibility. But I have found in my practice that I tend to go with the more simplistic explanations of what's going on because the majority of people in the Western world do not believe in reincarnation. And so um, when you start talking to them about it, if you start to get into some of these theories that are really challenging to understand, um, you lose them. And my goal is to provide healing for people at whatever level they're at. So I don't really talk to people about parallel lives or
Mm.
walk-ins or, quantum anything. I just don't do it. So I keep it as simple as I possibly can so that they understand it completely and thoroughly. And then later on, if they want to look into all these other theories, they're welcome to do that. I just don't include that in my day-to-day interactions with people.
No, I absolutely respect that. One more complicated question.
Oh, no.
Time.
Time.
I mean, I've had many people say to me, because I've remembered past lives, future lives in the now, is it all happening now?
That's another one of those questions.
Okay.
I mean, on the earth, time is linear, right? So it's like we've got the past, the present, the future. It isn't that way in spirit, obviously. There is no such thing as time in spirit. Uh, I've heard people who say that they can enter in and out of different time periods. I'm not one of them. And I have not really worked with anybody that's been able to do that. So I just, I'm sort of a student of Edgar Cayce, and it's one soul, one body, one soul. I don't believe, like, I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and this is the home of Thomas Jefferson. You would not believe the number of people who think they were Thomas Jefferson in a prior lifetime. You
Right.
know, do some of that, and then if you talk to them, they'll come up with all kinds of theories about how more than one person could be somebody famous. It's like an aspect of his soul went into this one, and an aspect of his soul went into another one. And I'm of the theory it's one soul, one person, so one body. So I sort of I'm not a believer of that. I mean, I respect them, and they have their reasons for believing in all of that, but it just isn't part of my day-to-day work with clients.
Thank you. Thank you. So
Sure.
in regards to the past lives, have you had clients or perhaps yourself that have had past lives not only on Earth, but other dimensions, other galaxies, other
I've had,
planets?
yeah, Luisa, I can count on one hand the number of people who have said they're from another star system. Uh, like I said, what Casey said, whatever starts on Earth has to end on the Earth.
Right.
And so I have had a few who have said, indicated that they're here, and they talk about how lonely they are and it's hard to adjust. And, they talk about that. I've had one who brought in with him some medical and scientific knowledge that was not native to our civilization, um, who described uh, another life in which they had a different color skin, like blue skin. But like I said, there have been only maybe a half dozen out of the thousands that I've worked with who said something like that.
I know you do some work with accessing your past lives through soul writing. Would you
Yeah.
mind sharing that and perhaps some tips for the audience who would like to
Oh,
start
sure.
with that simple, well, not simple, with that technique?
Okay, soul writing is basically a written form of meditation. So if you think of prayer as you talking to God, and meditation is God talking to you, soul writing is you taking notes. It is not automatic writing. That is the term that most people are aware of just because it's been around longer. The term soul writing is something I came up with when I was working on my master's degree, but it's based on the work of Edgar Cayce. He called it inspirational writing. And basically, it's writing in a altered state of consciousness. So if you're going into your meditation, you're putting the pen down to the paper, and you're asking spirit to provide a message for you. Now, it can be used in a lot of different ways. Um, I've called it soul writing because when Cayce called it inspirational writing, that was back in the 1930s and 40s. And if you were to type in inspirational writing now in Amazon to look for books on it, you're going to get all Christian genre books. If you type in automatic writing, you're going to get all books about the occult. So there was no term to describe what Cayce meant by doing this sort of guided writing. So I did my research and came up with the term soul writing because to me it was, it's coming from above, coming through you, out your soul, and then out on the paper. I use it for a lot of different ways. I teach it. Matter of fact, I'm doing a whole summer soul writing series for the ARE, 10 weeks from in July through the end of August, once a week on Zoom. And basically, I do use it a lot for past life work. You can, at the end of a regression, I'll ask a client, do you want to do the soul writing? And if they do, I'll walk them through it. If not, then I'll do it for them. And many times the soul writing will give you additional information that you did not get in the regression. In other words, it'll give you the backstory. It'll answer any question you might have. It'll give you the guidance, like, what do I do with this information? So basically, it's just while you're already in an altered state of consciousness, or if you choose to go into one, make sure that the important steps are that when you go into your meditation, that you surround yourself with white light. Put that impenetrable bubble of white light around you to keep you safe. Because one of the problems with automatic writing was that people were complaining about possession because they weren't protecting themselves, and any old, lower level energy was coming through and impacting them. So you surround yourself with the white light. You say a prayer of protection and just put the pen down on the paper and wait for a message. Now you can just say to spirit, can you provide a message for me that's for my highest and best? You can ask a specific question about a past life. You can actually have a conversation with your past life aspect if you choose to, where you've had the regression, and let's say your name was John in a previous life, and I'd like to talk to John. I want to know what life was like for him back in that time period, or ask him any questions about, what lessons did you learn in that life that I've brought in with me? You could use it for developing your psychic abilities. You could use it for a lot of composers and artists use a form of soul writing. It's the process. That's that going into that meditation and allowing spirit to come in and inspiring you to write something that you wouldn't write if you were in a conscious state. So, as a matter of fact, in my book on the Beatles, I write a little bit about how John and Paul both used aspects of soul writing in writing some of their music. For Paul, it was Yesterday and Let It Be. For John, Across the Universe and Nowhere Man. But they're not the only ones. I mean, we've got like Mozart and Beethoven and Bach, and even Stephen King is more of a contemporary writer. Keats and a lot of writers have talked about where is this inspiration coming from. And it's basically, they say it's like somebody's dictating something to me, or it's like I'm in a dream state and I'm pulling this down. And it sounds a lot different than what you would write in a conscious state in normal, And I've been a writer all my life, and I know the difference between when I'm writing commercial copy as opposed to when I go into meditation and I'm writing through the soul writing. So I have a whole book about soul writing, and I also have a book about using it for past life information. So So it's available if anybody wants to pursue it. And I also, like I said, I do teach it. I do private soul writing lessons for people if they choose to pursue it.
And I will leave a link below in the show notes for people that are listening. How, so would you, for the soul writing, would you write, just say you have a question, would you necessarily suggest the individual write the question on the page or telepathically ask it?
Either way, you can write it up at the top of the page, or you could do like a mental mantra. You could repeat it over and over, just so spirit knows exactly what it is that you're asking. I like to write it on the page because when they go back and reread it, which it's not always good to read it immediately when you get the message. Sometimes it's good to let it sit for a while because it's like a fine wine. It ages really well and you can go back. And oftentimes it'll mean something completely different to you when you read it later than it did at the time that you first wrote it. So having the question at the top of the page will enable you to remember what were you dealing with at that particular time. So date it and put the question and then wait for the answer. And you can have a whole conversation. You can put the question and then get the answer. And then if you want to have a conversation with spirit, you could put another question in there as if you were talking to somebody, and get another answer that way. So it's very interactive, and anybody can do it. You don't need to have a special talent, skill, or an ability. It's your God-given right to have access to this information. So people have found it a tremendous tool of healing as well. I had a woman contact me who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was given my book and she started to do the soul writing, and she credits that writing to her part of her healing. And other people have said the same thing. And as a matter of fact, I was at the University of Virginia Cancer Center, and I saw something where they're advertising, teaching people how to do journaling. So, I mean, I teach it a little different than what they're teaching, but it's the same idea that, it's very cathartic to put this information out there, and the writing will do it. I have a whole list of how to go about doing it. It's anybody wants it, they can contact me and I'm happy to send it to you. It'll give you the list of all the ways to use it. It'll tell you the steps and how to do it. And then it'll also give you side by side the difference between automatic writing and soul writing so that you know one from the other.
So, I mean, it's so interesting. I know you've got the list and people can contact you, but when you say go into an altered state of consciousness, is it a quiet, meditative space, and for how long?
How long your whole session would be?
No, how long will you quiet your mind and relax your
Well,
mind?
it depends on you. I mean, I think the more you do this, the shorter. I can usually get into it within a couple of minutes. I mean, it's like, just close my eyes and block out everything. I say my prayer of protection. See that white light surrounding me. Ask that only information from my highest and best come through. Invite my guides in and ask them, to work with me, and then wait. And sometimes the waiting for the pen to start moving is the longest part of it. But some people, you may start out and you may just get a word here or there. Other people will get a phrase. Other people will start getting a full sentence, and then others will start getting, paragraphs. Some people will get poems, and other people will get images in their mind that they want to draw. So if they're more artistically inclined, they can get their information that way. But basically, the process is the same. It's the going into your meditation, surrounding yourself with that white light, saying that prayer of protection, connecting to spirit. So it's like, I like to think of it as a 24-hour, 7 day a week phone home card. So if you ever get into trouble, it's like call home, because there's somebody, every one of us has guides who are assigned to us. In Catholicism, we believed in guardian angels. It's basically the same thing, that there is an energy, a higher entity who's always there for you, but you have to connect with them in order for them to help you. So, I think of it as like, when they do these telethons and they have everybody behind the tables waiting for the phones to ring. That's how I figure spirit is, like they're waiting for us to call, so they can help us. Because if we don't ask for the help, we're not going to get it. So they're there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call anytime. And that's the beauty of it, that you're never alone. And whenever I've done research projects using soul writing, that's the first thing people have said, that it was comforting to them to know that they weren't alone in this world, that there was somebody, something out there always looking out for them.
Yeah, very comforting. And perhaps the soul writing is a simple technique. As you said, it's accessible to everyone to communicate. And I guess the thing is, people have said this to me before, I'm just making it up. I'm just writing it. So to actually believe that it's coming through a higher power.
Well, I think that if you really are honest with yourself, and the way you write, and the way you think, you would know that this is something. For instance, one time I asked Spirit, what's the difference between the Ten Commandments and universal laws? Because I had heard that there were, I don't know, I was trying to find out how many universal laws are there really? Are there 50 or are there 200? And so I was writing, connecting, and you always connect with someone who's like an expert in that particular question. So I was sitting on my front porch, I'll never forget this, and I'm writing away. And then all of a sudden, and this happens a lot, I think of it like an Oreo cookie. It's like when you first start doing the writing, you get the hello, so glad to be here kind of thing. The message comes in the middle, the meat of it comes in the middle, and then at the end, it's the goodbye kind of thing. But in the middle of this message I got, there is no universal law that begins, thou shalt not. That was the answer to the question, what's the difference between them? And I never in my conscious state would have ever thought of that. That went right over my head. I was like, I had to actually stop writing and look, because I thought, what? I would never have written that. So that's how I knew that I was working with somebody at a different frequency, different level, and it was very comforting to me. And then that's why I believed the information I was getting, because I knew it was from a very high level source, you might say, in the universe. So yeah, so that's how you tell. Like even when I was mentioning to you about authors and composers, they say the same thing. I never would have written that in a conscious state. I worry about, is this plagiarism even? Where did this come from? It didn't come from me. I don't write like that. So that's pretty common when you're doing this kind of writing. But it's best to just let it unfold. Surrender to it and just go with the flow.
Yeah, very comforting. Just a couple more questions.
Yeah. When I do a regression with somebody, that's one of the first things I ask them when they go into, I do a very long induction, getting them to be very relaxed. And then I say a prayer of protection, surround them with white light. So when we're in this total relaxed state of being, which, by the way, for those who've never experienced this, what it feels like is, when you first wake up in the morning and you're lying in bed, your eyes are closed, but you feel really deep in the mattress. You're just so relaxed. You could open your eyes and get out of bed if you want, but you don't want to because you're so relaxed. That's the feeling it is. So then the first questions I ask them, when I take them across a bridge. I have them walk into a forest. Then when there's a bridge, the bridge takes them from the here and now to the lifetime their soul wants them to see. We get to the other side of the bridge, I'll start asking them identification questions. I'll ask them, are your feet bare or are they covered? What are you wearing? Are you male or female? How old are you? What color's your hair? What color's your skin? What's your body makeup like? And what's your name? Where are you geographically? And what year is it? So we go through all those types of questions so they get in their mind's eye an identity of who they are, what they look like. And they could picture it the way you would a movie. Like I tell them, well, somebody's made a movie about your past life. What are you seeing on the screen? So they can pretty much see themselves that way. And it's pretty interesting to hear what they have to say.
So fascinating, and even to geographically pinpoint to some extent the life. Is it hard sometimes for people to perhaps give the date? Is that a
Yeah, I
common
have
thing?
some people, right. Some people, the date will pop in their head and they'll go, yeah, it's 1632. They're sure of it. Others will say, I don't know, it's the 1600s sometime. And then others will identify it by what's going on historically. So they'll say, I'm in ancient Egypt, or I'm in the American Civil War, or I'm in medieval England. So they identify it that way. We try to narrow it down as much as we possibly can. People get less likely to be more specific if it's BC, if they're talking about before Christ. Or they identify it as, oh, it's pre-industrial, something like that. But it helps them to have the date because if they want to do research later on, if they died of a plague and they say it's 1692, well, they can go back and look at what were there any plagues in England in 1692, so that's how it's helpful. It's also helpful to know what's going on morally or culturally at that time period, especially for women. Like if their lifetime is in the 17th century, 16th century, they had so many limitations on what they could do and their fears about if they had special skills and talents, if they were natural born healers, for instance. I have a lot of healers who come to me and they're blocked. They feel like they could do healing in this life, but they're afraid to because there's something stopping them. And that's the memory of what happened to them the last time they did it. So that's all really helpful when you're trying to pinpoint a date.
So interesting. And you're working with the soul too. As you said, we've had many, many, many incarnations. The soul takes us to a point in another life that we need to learn from. Just one more question on
Exactly.
this. Generally, when there probably is no rule, but when you're doing a regression with someone, do they usually go back to a similar age, or do they go back as a child? Is it generally a similar age that they identify with in another life? Not at all.
No, they're all over the place. I've had
Okay.
them be, yeah, they're 4 years old, they're teenagers, they're 30s and 40s or older. Yeah, this is where we first meet them. And then when I ask them to go to the significant event in that life, they may go to a time when they're younger or older, because we can move back and forth. So it's, I say to them, tell me something significant that happened to you, and you can start at any point in time. Could have happened when you were a child, a teenager, young adult, or older. And sometimes they'll jump to when they were middle age, and then I know, well, we've got all these years prior to that age. There may have been something important that happened growing up, so then I'll move them back. But yeah, there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's all over the place.
And have you done a regression with someone who's experienced dying and leaving the physical body?
Oh, all of them, all of them. That's one of the
Oh,
questions.
okay.
Yeah, after they get done with the telling me the significant event in that life, then we go to their death. And I
Wow.
tell
Okay.
them they don't feel anything. It's like watching a movie. So then I ask them, where are you on the day that you died? How old are you? Are you alone? What are you dying from? And then the important questions, what were your last thoughts as your soul left that body? Because that often sets up the next lifetime. I had a woman come to me, she had head to toe psoriasis. She wanted to know what's the source of the psoriasis. And she went to a past life in which she was a prostitute in the Old West. And at the point of death, I said, well, what were your last thoughts when your soul left that body? And she said, I don't want to be touched anymore. So she comes into this life and manifests a skin condition in which nobody wants to touch her. So that happens a lot. So understanding what your last thoughts are when your soul leaves your body is real helpful. And then I'll ask them, what do you have in common with the person you were back then? Do you see any behavior patterns that are similar? Any parallels? And are there any people from that life in your life now? And if they are, why? What role are they playing? And then the last question is, why do you think Spirit wanted you to see this life? What's the lesson in it for you? What was the message for you? Now, if they choose to go further and they want to do the pre-life planning session, then we get into more about what they were doing in the afterlife to plan this next life. But if it's a traditional regression, it stops at that point.
Wow, that's so incredibly interesting. So you do pre-life as well and pre-life planning. What?
Right. They go through the regression, and then I bring them back to the here and now, and then I back them up so they get younger and younger and younger. Then they go into the afterlife to before they were conceived in this life. And then I start asking them questions about what their experience is in the afterlife. When they appear before the Council of Elders, what's the list of karmic issues, list of karmic attributes, what's their soul's mission going to be? Why did they choose their parents? Because that's our choice, our mother and father. What other souls said they'd come forward to help? And why did they pick the body that they have now? Why did they want to be male? Why did they want to be female? So those are those kinds of questions about planning the next lifetime.
My gosh, it's so interesting. And the in-between lives, we could call them. Are they, what's the feeling? Do they have a similarity for all people? Do they say they're conscious? I'm answering the questions. Are they a consciousness? What does it feel
You know
like
what?
for
When
them?
I did a research project for my book, uh, I did it to myself again, and I had read all of Dr. Michael Newton's work on life between lives. There were some things that he wrote that didn't, that I had not experienced in my practice with people, and also they did not really sort of fall in line with what Edgar Cayce was teaching. And of course, to me, Edgar Cayce is my greatest teacher. And so I decided to do my own research project on what goes on. And their answers were surprisingly similar. And what I'd hoped would happen and did happen was that by understanding what that process was like, it would alleviate people's fear of death. It was almost like, oh, I've done this lots of times. Here I go again, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it was pretty surprisingly similar. And these people did not know each other. And yet the things that they were telling me were eerily similar to what the person before them and the person after them said in terms of what they saw, what they experienced. So all of my findings are in that book. Most of my books are based on research projects, and that was where I actually have volunteers who've come in to do the regressions and the other work with me. And then I've taken those case studies and turned them into a book. And that's the one on the pre-life planning, if anybody's interested. I did it to myself again, it's called.
I did it to myself again. I love that. And it must alleviate suffering and provide some sort of enlightenment that they chose this incarnation.
Yeah, if they understand that. Yeah. In other words, you plan this out, work through it. Don't throw in the towel prematurely because you don't want to deal with it, because you're going to have to deal with it eventually anyway. And it also helps you to look at the people around you with new eyes, even the people that have hurt you. Because when you think about it, they're part of your soul group. They came in to help you learn a lesson. Okay, yeah, they hurt you. Well, what did you learn from that experience? Because if you learn something from that experience, then they did their job. They said, I'll come in and I'm going to be this to you. I'll be, a husband who leaves you or abuses you, and also I want to make it clear that not all past lives are traumatic. There's not drama in all of them. Most of us are just, ordinary people. Some lifetimes people are extremely happy. They're happy, they have love in their life, they're not lacking for anything. I tell them that's a vacation life, because you may have had a very traumatic life prior to that one, or you may be getting ready to have a traumatic life after that. So you're coming into Earth for what Earth was originally designed for, which was like a little vacation hotspot for us. Um, so just enjoy it. There's nothing that says that you had to be tortured or died from some terrible disease in any given lifetime. Some of the lifetimes you're happy, healthy, and have love, and just sit back and enjoy those, because we're entitled to those just as much as anything else.
We are. Thank you, Joanne. A big congratulations on your book, The Inner Light. Is there anything you'd like to share about the book with the audience?
Well, the book is sort of a unique perspective for me, because the first chapters are all about the years I spent with the Beatle fan club, starting my own fan club and then becoming national chapter director for the official Beatles fan club, which was operating under Apple Records in New York. What happened when the clubs were disbanded, how that all came about. I have some information there about the concert for Bangladesh that I attended. There's a chapter in there in which I interviewed other Beatle fans to find out if they were impacted spiritually by the Beatles. I have a whole chapter on soul writing, which is where I get into, John and Paul's use of that method to write. And then at the end is all of the comments and the quotes from the different four of them, not so much Ringo, but mostly John and Paul. No, mostly John and George, on different aspects of metaphysical study. So there's information there, not only about how they felt about reincarnation, but also what they felt about death, and things like numerology and psychic abilities and kundalini, and a lot of the stuff that's all part of our basket of metaphysical goodies that we study, and how they in fact just planted that seed in our generation that, for me, it blossomed into a whole career doing reincarnation research and therapy.
Two more questions.
Sure.
Wait, do you still listen to Beatles music?
All the time. I have the Beatles channel on Sirius XM and play it constantly. Yeah, I love it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, my final question, it's not really a question. Is there anything you'd like to share with the Passion Harvest audience that I haven't asked you today?
No, but if they're interested in my work, they're welcome to come to my website, which is joannedimaggio.com. I have all the books on there. I have case studies on there. I have a blog, and also the different types of services that I offer. If you're interested in a regression or learning soul writing, you can book that right online. And I think I have a big question and answer section as well. So I hope that hopefully I've anticipated any questions anybody might have. So, but I'm very approachable. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to answer you. If you're experiencing anything that you would like to discuss in private, I'm here for you. So, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Joanne DiMaggio, thank you so much for being on Passion Harvest.
My pleasure, Luisa. Thank you for
Mine
inviting me.
too. Thank you. Bye-bye.